Okay, so even those that are good at basic math can easily make an error in this problem right here. So you got to be very careful and focus and take your time with this problem. But if you're strong in basic math, you should be able to easily figure out the answer without the aid of a calculator. All right, so let's take a look at this problem. We have a bracket 4 minus 3 squared minus a minus 9 in parentheses bracket divided by parentheses 1 minus 3 and parentheses cubed. All right, so a lot to do here, but hopefully this is not that difficult. But we have a multiple choice question, and let's take a look at our answers. So A is 7, B is negative 1 half, C is 18, and D is 0. All right, so once again, no calculators, but if you can figure this out, go ahead and put your answer into the comment section. I'll show you the correct answer in just 1 second. Then, of course, I'm going to walk through step by step how to solve this problem. But before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John, and I have been teaching middle and high school math for decades. And if you need help learning math, check out my math help program at tcmathacademy.com. You can find a link to that in the description below. And if this video helps you out, or if you just enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps me out. All right, let's take a look at this problem one more time because there is a lot to do here. And in math, we call that number crunching. So get your paper and pencil out and definitely take your time with this. The worst thing you can do, even if you are strong in basic math, is just to try to do this problem in like 2 steps, right? Just step by step. And also, this is a great way to kind of, make the most out of this video because if you get this wrong and you write out each step, you can determine a specific step that you didn't understand or you were confused about and correct that. All right, so again, we have brackets 4 minus 3 squared minus parentheses negative 9 parentheses bracket divided by parentheses 1 minus 3 and parentheses cubed. Okay, so let's take a look at the right answer. The correct answer here is B, negative 1 half. All right, now if you got this right, you definitely get a happy face, an A plus, a 100%, and a certificate of excellence for being a overall math superstar in basic math. And that would include things like positive and negative numbers, but particularly you really need to know the order of operations to get this problem right. But there's some other areas in here that can confuse people, like this part of the problem. So if you didn't get this answer, or if you didn't get this problem correct, no worries. We're going to get into it right now. Okay, now as I indicated, if you tried this problem but you kind of, just took a step or two, it's going to be hard to determine where you made an error. It's okay not to get a math problem right because learning or making mistakes is part of learning. But what you don't want to do is not know what part of the problem you don't understand. And the only way you're going to improve in math is to write out each step, what you believe is the next correct step in the problem. And a problem like this kind of should have like an ice cream cone shape in terms of the solution, right? So we have the problem, it's like this. We take a step, it's a little bit less work, less work, less work. So you want to have this kind of shape. You don't want to have like this down to this. You're like, hey, where's the work at? All right, so enough said about showing your work being neat and structured, but that is a critical part of being successful in math. Okay, so we have a multiple choice question here. Can these answers really help us determine the correct answer to this problem? Well, not so much, right? If we had like an equation, an algebraic equation, you can use the answers to figure out, whether indeed you did the problem right. You can always check your solutions into an equation, but we don't have this kind of scenario. But the worst thing you could do is leave this like blank on a test or a quiz. So if you're like, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I don't know what to do, well, just take a guess. You might be saying, well, I'm in a mood for a 0 today. Well, that's a great guess. Unfortunately, that's wrong, but at least try. That's the worst thing you could do on any math exam unless you get penalized for the wrong answer. And that can be the case on some exams like the SAT or ACT. You might get like a little bit of a point off if you answer incorrectly. And those type of tests, then you want to think about whether you want to take a guess or not. But in this situation and on most math exams, always try. Okay, so here, what do we got going on? Well, we have various mathematical operations. So we have division, we have subtraction, we have parentheses, we have brackets, we have powers. So, and over here, well, this is a squared and this is a cubed. So we got a lot going on. So as I indicated, what are the skills that we're going to need to know to solve this problem? Well, one thing for sure is you're going to have to know how to work with positive and negative numbers. Okay, so this is kind of its own separate little chapter or unit when you learn, like middle school math or pre-algebra, certainly like basic algebra. Okay, so if you're not up to speed on positive and negative numbers, well, this is not difficult, but you're not going to be able to understand how to solve this problem. Now, the next thing you need to know is about powers, right? So we have some situations here where we have 3 squared, but this subtraction sign is going to cause a lot of confusion for somebody out there. I'll get to that in a second, but you need to know how to evaluate powers. But this is a squared, and over here is a cubed. And then, of course, we have division, and then we need to know what to do with this negative of a negative. So a lot going on, but in particular, what you need to really be good at is what we call the order of operations. And that brings me to one of my favorite phases in math is that's called PEMDAS, right? So that's what we have right here. Now this is an acronym, okay? So these are letters, they stand for something, but effectively this is a checklist so we can always apply the correct order of operations. So in math, things like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and even powers, anything we can do with 2 numbers. So if I give you the numbers like 2 and 5, what can we do with those numbers? Well, we can add them, so we can subtract them, we can multiply, we can divide them, we can even take powers. So these are kind of mathematical operations, but depending on the order you take when you do a problem like this, you're going to come up with different values as your answer. Of course, there's only one right answer, and that depends on taking the correct order. Okay, so you got to know the correct order to do this problem. Now that's one aspect of the problem. The other aspect is you got to know something again about positive and negative numbers and powers. But let's go ahead and just first start with PEMDAS. Right, so this is basically a little mnemonic. PEMDAS, a little phrase you can use. Let me actually give you a mnemonic, which is a memory aid, and then I'll tell you what these letters stand for. So PEMDAS. So P is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Once again, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. This is how you can remember PEMDAS, this lovely acronym, but this is the secret to the correct order of operations. All right, now this is effectively a checklist. We're going to go from left to right, and let me go ahead and start explaining this right now. Okay, so we're going to start with P. Okay, again, we're going to go from left to right. So what does P stand for? Well, P stands for parentheses, okay? But not just those type of parentheses. It can be brackets as well, or these squiggly type of parentheses. Effectively, this is what we call grouping symbols. So if you have like 2 times 3 minus 1, I can group any 2 numbers together differently. I could be like, well, I'm going to do this, or maybe I want to group these numbers like this, okay? So grouping symbols definitely affect the outcome in terms of the correct order of operations, so we need to be on the lookout for parentheses or grouping symbols, which include these brackets and this brackets. Now, one thing about parentheses or grouping symbols, oftentimes you have a problem with multiple sets of grouping symbols. So what you want to do is focus on the innermost parentheses and then just kind of work your way out. Okay. All right, so I'll show you more about the parentheses part of PEMDAS here in a second, but let's talk about what E stands for. All right, so E stands for exponent, so let's just kind of recall what an exponent is. So if we have 2 to the 3rd power, this part of the power, this 2, is called the base, and this little top number here to the right, this 3 is called the exponent. So E stands for exponent, so you just basically want to be on the lookout for powers. So again, you're going to start from the left to right, you're going to look for parentheses, and then the next thing you're going to look for is any powers, right, or anything with an exponent. Okay, so the next step is one of the most confused steps of basic math, so you want to pay attention. But before I tell you that, let's just go ahead and talk about what M, D, A, and S stand for. So M stands for multiplication, D stands for division, A stands for addition, and S stands for subtraction. Now, most of you might be saying, okay, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I know what you're going to do. We're going to do all the multiplication next, and then after all multiplication is done, we'll move on to division and then addition and subtraction. And that makes sense, especially the way I'm explaining it, but that's not the way it works. So some of you might be saying, all right, Mr. YouTube Math Man, oh, that's a terrible little expression. I could do better than that. Hold on one second. I just love to kind of throw in these little facial expressions because as a teacher, you get the opportunity to see all types of faces, and you're like, hey, what are you talking about? You just told me this is a checklist from left to right, but now you're telling me something different. Well, let me explain. Okay, so we got PE. Well, the next step from left to right is multiplication or division. Multiplication or division, whatever you see first from left to right. Okay, so if you have multiplication, then division in the problem, and you see multiplication first from left to right, you're going to do that problem first, and then the division problem next. But if you have division first from left to right, and then multiplication, this is the way you do the problem, and addition and subtraction work the same way. It's a group, and you're going to do whatever you see first from left to right. Okay, so that is PEMDAS, and assuming you have some pretty good skills with positive and negative numbers, you should be able to do this problem. So let's go and get into it. And first things first, we have a what we call a numeric expression. We got all these numbers that are trying to express something which is one value, and what we want to do is simplify it, but we know we're going to have to really pay attention to the order of operations. So we got to size this problem up in a way where we can just kind of chip away at it one step at a time. That is very critical when you do math. You got to just take one step and write that step nice and neat and double check and kind of grade yourself as you go. And you definitely want to be on the lookout for making errors. Even if you're good in math, we all make errors. So when you take a step, double check yourself and say, all right, did I make an error? And then once you're confident you did that step correctly, move on to the next step. Okay, so here we have brackets and we have parentheses. So what should we do? Well, effectively, when we look at this PEMDAS, you're like, well, should I start over here and then do this? Well, what we can do is look at this as two problems, okay? So you have a group of numbers over here, okay? So this represents one value. And then you have a group of numbers over here that's being cubed. But in between them, you have division. So the best way to look at this problem is as a fraction. Okay, so this would be the numerator. It's this thing being divided by this. In other words, if you had 4 divided by 7, that's equal to 4 over 7. So it's very helpful to express this problem or to think of it as a fraction where we have a specific numerator and denominator. And let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so here is our problem. Let's think of it this way. So we have this one big group. Okay, so all of this is in a group and it's being divided by this group. So effectively, this is the problem. Now, it's good to kind of look at the problem this way because when you have a fraction situation, you can kind of split this fraction up into its own separate problems. In other words, the numerator, what's going on in the numerator, it's like its own world. Okay, you could just focus on the numerator as its own problem. And then down here we have the denominator as its own world. We can just kind of focus on that as its own problem. So what we want to do here as a strategy is to figure out what the numerator is equal to. Get this down to one value, and then we're going to do the same thing with the denominator. And then once we're done with all those steps, we can simplify the fraction. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it right now. And again, we always want to be thinking about the order of operations, PEMDAS. So you kind of can do this problem in parallel. In other words, you can take a step in the numerator and take a step in the denominator, but don't take any more than 2 steps. But effectively what you're doing is 2 problems at the same time. All right, so here we go. We have brackets, right? So these are grouping symbols. Matter of fact, we can write PEMDAS up here, P-E-M-D-A-S. So this P, okay, applies to both the numerator and the denominator, right? So do we have any grouping symbols or parentheses? Yes, indeed we do. We have brackets here. We have parentheses here. So we can do what's inside of the parentheses in the denominator, and then we're going to start working on what's inside the grouping symbols in the numerator. And in the numerator, what do we have? Well, let's go ahead and take the next step. Do we have any more parentheses inside of here? We do. We have parentheses -9, but there's nothing to do inside these parentheses. In other words, we don't have like -9 plus 8 or something like that. So when you have just a number inside of parentheses, that's not something you would take a step with in terms of PEMDAS. Okay, if there was like a mathematical operation here, okay, yeah, of course we would do that. So at this point, it's just this negative number in this parentheses. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. Do we have any powers or any exponents? Of course we do. So we're going to take care of this, and we're going to take care of this first. So let's go ahead and do that right now. But before I show you the answer, this part of the problem will tend to confuse a lot of people. But let's take a look at the steps here. So when we do this, you're going to get -9 in the numerator for that step, and then -2 down here in the denominator. Let's talk about the denominator real quick. So we have 1 minus 3, so that is the same thing as 1 plus a -3. That's equal to -2. Now, if you don't know why that is, matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and give you suggestions right now. I have a ton of videos on my YouTube channel that go over the rules for positive and negative numbers. So you got to know positive and negative numbers, how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Not that difficult, but if you didn't get this right, well, that is, put that on your math shopping list. You need to go pick up some skills on how to work with positive and negative numbers, right? So again, this is the value of showing your steps, because if you don't understand something, well, that's what you need to improve, and then everything will get much better. Okay, so 1 minus 3 is -2. And by the way, if you are really at this level of math, we're like, yes, I'm doing a lot of order of operations problem. This is kind of like pre-algebra. So you can check out my pre-algebra course. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description of this video, or my math skills rebuilder course, right? Matter of fact, my math skills rebuilder course, I start with basic math, so real world basic stuff like fractions, percent, to include order of operations, decimals, just basic number operations, and then I teach you a ton of algebra, geometry, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of resources. So just make sure you get the help that you need. Just don't leave this video not knowing something. Okay, now let's talk about this -3 squared, because this part of the problem is going to confuse a lot of people. Now, when I created this problem, I purposely put in things that I know that students confuse a lot, right? So here is the problem with this, -3 squared. Sometimes students think of this as -3 squared. They think this is what this means. So -3 squared would be equal to a +9. So this can be easily confused as 4 plus 9, okay? That's not the situation. So what we have is 4 minus 9 right there. Okay, so 4 minus 9, why is that the case, and why is it not 4 plus 9? Well, I'm going to explain this right now. Okay, so big difference here. -3 squared does not mean the same thing as -3. Yeah, that's a terrible -3. I could do better than that. -3 squared like this. These two things do not mean the same. This -3 squared, the exponent is only working on this base, which is 3. This is the opposite of 3 squared, so this is -9. -3 squared means take -3 and multiply it by itself. A negative times a negative is a positive. That's +9. Very, very common error. So here, again, this is going to be 4 minus 3 squared, which is a +9. Okay, so here we go. That is the result of doing that step. And now what we need to do is continue to work inside of these brackets down here, and then we'll talk about what -2 cubed means in just 1 second. So let's go ahead and continue on. And what we have now, actually, let's just go ahead and explain what we have to do is what? We have subtraction and subtraction, but this right here, okay, I'm kind of going a little bit fast. I'm going to slow things down here. This is really multiplication. So this is obviously subtraction, okay? But technically, what's going on right here is multiplication. So what comes first when it comes to the order of operations? It's multiplication, right? So PEMDAS. So we're still inside these brackets. There's no more powers. So do we have multiplication or division? We do have multiplication, but it's not that really obvious that we do have multiplication right here. But see, there really is a 1 outside of this parentheses. So this is like a negative 1 times a negative 9. So when you have a negative of a negative, a negative of a negative, like this, negative of a negative 9, or like a negative of a negative 3, typically you won't see it written this way because it's like two negatives, so that these will be in parentheses. This is negative signs, or another way you can think of them as being opposite. So this is like the opposite of a negative 9, which is positive 9, or the opposite of negative 3, which is a positive 3, or negative 1 times negative 9. A negative times a negative is positive. So all of this is going to be a positive 9. All right, so again, we're going to do multiplication before subtraction when it comes to the order of operations. And then we'll talk about what negative 2 cubed means here in a second. All right, so here we go. So now we have 4 minus 9 plus 9 over negative 8. Okay, so negative 8 is the result of negative 2 cubed. So what does negative 2 cubed mean? Well, it means to take negative 2 and multiply it by itself 3 times, right? So that's negative 2 cubed. So negative times negative is positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. So you got to be very careful here. So negative 2 cubed is negative 8. All right, so we are almost done, and hopefully at this point of the problem, it's not going to be that much more or that difficult for anyone with basic math skills. But let's go and take the next step, which of course is having you quickly subscribe to my YouTube channel. Now, I definitely need your support. Matter of fact, I need your help, and I am not shy to ask for your help. And you shouldn't be shy to ask for help as well when it comes to mathematics, right? So if you're struggling with math, you're like, I'm not good at math, I don't understand. Well, have you looked for help? Now, if you are a student, where should you go get help from? Well, you should go immediately to your teacher. Now, a lot of you are going to be saying, well, if my teacher was so good, I would understand them, I wouldn't need help. Well, I get that. Even if your teacher, if you don't connect with their teaching style, still get in communication with your teacher. Say, hey, teacher, what don't I understand? And they'll, tell you. They should look at your work, and they should be able to give you like a quick diagnostic kind of assessment of what's going on. Well, you don't understand fractions, positive, negative numbers, da 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 da. So you can get that kind of list, and hopefully your teacher can help you out. But if you don't, if you need to find someone else to teach you this stuff, at least you have something to work on. Okay, the worst thing in math is to be like, I don't understand. And this is the case when I used to tutor many, many years ago. I would try to, ask, hey, what don't you know? And no, I had to kind of assess a student. But if you're like, well, I just don't get math, that's just too broad and general. That's why you need to write out your work step by step. Okay, but for me, I need to build my YouTube channel step by step, and I need your help. There's no way I can grow my channel unless people like yourself say, all right, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I'll go ahead and subscribe. And if you are a subscriber, thank you so much. Make sure to hit that notification bell as well so you can get my latest videos. And for those of you that really do need help beyond this video or beyond what you can find online, you definitely got to check out my full main math courses. I go way beyond what I do on YouTube. I really break down the topics, and we go through basic examples to more advanced examples in each respective area of mathematics. So you can find all that information in the description. So let's go and continue on because there's really not much more to do here. All right, so remember, we're going to treat the numerator as its own problem and the denominator as its own problem. We're already down to one number in the denominator, but we're not done with the numerator. Okay, so it's basically its own problem. And when we think of PEMDAS, remember, we're still on this parentheses step, okay? So we're just kind of working inside of the grouping symbols. Again, it's not just these parentheses, it's brackets as well, okay? So we're still in here, but this is going to be pretty simple. So we have subtraction and addition. So we could really turn this into an addition problem. So 4 minus 9 is the same thing as 4 plus negative 9. So now we just have to add these three numbers, and negative 9 plus a positive 9. I'm sorry, it's 4 minus 9 plus 9. So 4 minus 9 is the same thing as 4 plus a negative 9. So negative 9 plus 9 is 0. So that's going to be 4. Well, let me write it out like this. So 4 plus negative 9 plus 9. This is 0. So we end up with just 4. in our numerator over -8 in our denominator, but we don't want to leave our answers like this. We want to fully simplify, so this is a negative fraction. So 4/8 is the same thing as 1/2, but this is negative, so the final answer is -1/2. Okay, so again, I think a lot of people, when they see in a numeric expression, a problem like, let me just kind of go up here, we'll take a look at the original problem, something like this, I think arithmetic just doesn't get the respect it deserves. A lot of students, especially those that are studying the algebra or more advanced math, they're like, hey, Mr. YouTube Math, man, I learned this way back in the day. Just because you learn this like, back in, many years ago, doesn't necessarily mean that you mastered it, okay? And if you want to be successful in math, you have to master the foundations of math. And that requires a lot of practice, okay? Because there's all sorts of opportunities to make errors here. But you'll kind of notice as you strengthen your foundations, even if you're like, if you have to go back a couple, 2, 3 years for where you're at right now in math, everything is going to get much, much better. So if you see something or if you saw something in this problem that you didn't understand, make sure you follow through. But anyways, with all that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.